I do talk about media a lot. Okay, yes, there's some media experiences. Ugh. Remember how I did a massive takedown? E.B. White,
Oh,
who wrote Charlotte's Web.
mm-hmm,
And you were even slightly uncomfortable. You were like,
mm-hmm,
how could John take down this
mm-hmm.
beautiful literature from my childhood
Well,
and destroy it like this? Ugh. Totally destroyed.
yeah. I'm just like a little bit like, that book is not really speaking to me, and I have to admit that I've never really liked that story that much, and
I'm glad
I've
you're
got some
disavowing
weird
it now.
I've got some weird feelings about it. And you were just like, that story.
I'm gonna kill it. Yes.
So it was a little
I think I
intense.
basically called that writer satanic,
Yeah, you
didn't
did.
I, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you know why? You know what it is? After meeting some great farmers in Missouri, like a few months ago, just meeting wonderful people and having this affection for the natural life on a farm, even though I'm not a farmer, I probably would never become a farmer. I'm just like, you say what? With Charlotte's Web? Some pig? Really? Come on. Are you serious? And I almost feel like I'm putting myself in the shoes of those people from the era that this book came out. People who were like crossing their arms, going, "You're teaching our kids what about slaughtering animals on a farm? You're teaching what to kids about animal rights?" And I think now that we've seen where our society has gone, animal rights is just one of those many kind of like pillars that were holding up our society. And Charlotte's Web takes a chainsaw to one of those pillars, which is human rights, which differentiates humans from animals. Because the idea, just like the same idea with Darwinianism and things like this, is that if you can say humans come from animals, and you can say essentially we're basically, you know, uh, complicated animals, and that means we can be killed. And there's no moral issue with doing that. There's no moral problem really now in the water of society, which is telling us that we're made in the image of God. And so raising up animal rights is effectively a reduction of human rights. This is my belief. And so sure, you can call me whatever name you want, but like if if you know enough about animal husbandry, if you know enough about farming animals and where we get our food, you know that we butcher these animals because that's the way nature works. Adam and Eve sinned, and God basically butchered an animal to cover their sin, right? So there is a long history, and it's not just the story of Adam and Eve. Also, after Noah and the flood, not only did God institute laws against murder and said if people commit murder, they have to be punished with their life themselves, because what was happening before the flood, right? Tons of violence against human beings. And it was so bad that God had to institute a new law, right? And because before then, what happened? The first murder, Cain and Abel, God exiles Cain out of mercy. So to differentiate, right, in between human and animal rights came after the flood, right? Where God said, if you murder a man, then he's going to be punished with his life. He's gonna have to be punished with his life to prevent more of this violence from happening. But also, guess what? He relaxed the rules against eating animals. So this allows us to not feel guilty when we obey God and use animals for our food. So there's a lot of theories on why that is, but I think that the answers are clear enough in the sense that a lot of murder and crime and terrible violence was happening, and God wanted to put an end to that, and he's using, I think many. Um, I think he's creating an understanding for us about what the value of human life is. But with Darwinianism, the idea is that we're going to mix up humans with animals. We're going to be all mixed together. This takes mankind away from the very clear biblical principle that we as mankind are made in the image of God. He even knows us in the womb and knits us in the womb, made beautifully and fearfully in the womb. So and it even says he knows us in the womb. So that means we are a person in the womb. So this really identifies the great value of human life. And in another place in scripture, it says that one human life is worth more than the entire earth and everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the incredible value to God of mankind. And so we should at least have the same value system. Why would we not care about ourselves that much? It doesn't even make sense. We care about our own lives. Why wouldn't we care about the lives of our brother and sister? But Charlotte's Web takes the idea of being a special person that lives in the exception. Wilbur is the exception to the rule. He doesn't have to be butchered like the other pigs. No, because he's so cute, right? This appeals to the eight-year-old character in the story.
Fern. Yep.
Yeah, Fern. That's right. This appeals to the sentimentality and the nature of a kid who's about 8 years old, who is only thinking of the moment and the momentary pain of this small creature. And that is sweet and admirable that she cares about that. But in farm life, right, both life and death are beautiful and precious, not just life. Life and death both have value. And so, but what we're being presented with is the testimony of a mother spider who's putting into this little girl her concerns and fears and sharing with her her craftiness to lie to her and tell her that human beings are dumb and stupid. And if she just leaves a message in this web, right, she'll be able to fool all these people. And even the book treats it like these people are really silly and stupid for believing the message in this web, right? And treating the pig like it's really special when it was, I mean, the first thing, it's actually the spider who's kind of crazy smart here, right? And really special. Which, funny enough, the spider in the end, Charlie in the end, has to do what? Sacrifice herself for her children. And so she can't escape from the truth herself. And she has to admit that she's not special, right? As it comes to being apart from nature, like the rules of nature don't apply to her. No, of course, not only do they apply to Charlotte, but her life is more beautiful and special because she sacrifices her life for her little spider kids, right? And so then why is it that when she is willing and able to sacrifice, right, in the way nature dictates, she's not saying that Wilbur has to, right? Because she wants Wilbur to believe that he's special. She wants Fern to believe that Wilbur is special and thereby break the continuity of nature because you will believe whatever. So when I was talking about how this writer is doing, yeah, I'm going to use the S word, is almost doing something satanic. Why do I say that? Because Charlotte is like the writer. Charlotte is very much like the writer herself, who makes a web. And that web is like an advertisement, a message. And the message is, oh, poor Wilbur. Wilbur is special. Wilbur doesn't need to work on a farm and contribute and give of his own life for the benefit of others. Wilbur can be like a modern pig. Wilbur doesn't have to work. Wilbur lives in his mom's basement and plays video games. You see where I'm going with this? This is entering the modern stage, right? Individualism and this and being ripped from nature and how nature works means that you can believe that you're special and you're an individual and the rules don't have to apply to you, right? But when you actually live in nature and you live on a farm, which is probably the closest thing you can get to nature, living in some kind of harmony with nature, what do you find out? That no matter that they said in the beginning of Charlotte's Web that Wilbur is small and thin and useless and therefore has to be butchered, right? Because why? Because he would be butchered if he was fat, right? Does that make any sense? No. Wilbur is useful whether he's small or whether he's plump and tasty. Why? Because the farmer is going to eat him either way. He's just going to probably appreciate him if he's more plump, but he's still useful. So, Wilbur is not useless. Wilbur and every pig, has some use. But here's the real lesson here. The farmer has a plan. The farmer has a right to his farm and make a plan on his farm. And we live on God's farm, right? And God has a plan for us. And when we refuse to follow that plan, we're trying to step outside of God's nature and the nature and the plan he set up for us. And our claim is to say, well, I am some pig. I am really special. I don't have to follow the rules on God's farm. I don't have to, right? Let's go to the story of Christianity. Christ says, what? Carry your cross and follow me. And instead, what has Western civilization said? I don't have to carry my cross and follow God. I am some pig. Let me tell you. And I can live in my mom's basement and play video games. I don't need to become productive, useful part of society and help others and consider others as worth more than me, right? I'm not part of this larger society. And the truth is, you can pretend that you're not part of larger society. You can hope and dream and wish that you were not useful to society and that people would just leave you alone. But it doesn't work that way. Whether you want to be part of society or not, you are going to be. Just like Wilbur, whether he's a fat pig or a thin pig, doesn't matter. He's going to die or be butchered anyway. Right. So, yes, we should show compassion to Wilbur. And did you know that's part of the kosher laws? When they butcher an animal, they have to be compassionate to it. Isn't that amazing? God's law is actually for you to be compassionate to the Wilburs, right? And so God makes room for all of this. He cares about this whole process.
Yeah.
And so we have to admit that we're not special. We're not a special pig. We're not some pig. Instead, we're even more special. We get to be part of God's kingdom. We get to follow in Christ's footsteps and carry our cross and sacrifice for our brother and sister and sacrifice for our family. That's what we do when we love somebody, right? Isn't that what Christ said, showed us what love is?
Mm-hmm.
So we're learning what love is, and that means that's what love looks like. So that's why I call the message from Charlotte satanic, because it's literally trying to subvert the farmer's plan, who represents God. So it appears very cruel at first, as it would to an 8-year-old. Actually, it's very compassionate. And there's ways to butcher an animal very quickly and painlessly. So, this just is part of the feminization of our society. This is part of the dehumanization and the breakdown of civilization that we see in our society. And funny enough, Charlotte's Web was a part of that. Charlotte's Web brought animal rights into the mainstream. And even though it didn't actually make a lot of sense, and it still doesn't make a lot of sense today, we all know, if you think about it for 5 minutes, where our bacon comes from. We all know that. And it came from Wilbur's, you know?
It came from the terrific pigs.
From the terrific. And he wasn't able to escape that fate. Remember what I was telling to you this morning as well, which is I was even taking it to like all the way down to civilization. Like I was like Aesop's fables is a bunch of tragedies that if you don't follow nature, that's what you're going to get, right? And so the Greeks understood that there was uh, this dilemma like Charlotte's Web. This dilemma existed. But what Greek civilization teaches is that when you try to become the exception, like the Wilburs, you're just going to get tragedy coming down upon you. This is where Greek tragedies actually come from, is the anomaly of us wanting to be unique. If you go down that path and your fate takes that turn, right? Because they believe in the fates, that sometimes this just happens to people and you can't escape it, right? So if you're this character, apparently, and you go down this path and the fates have set for you some special pig, actually you can't escape your fate. You cannot escape being butchered. In fact, you're going to be butchered even more, right? Because now you're trying to break the social order as well, not only the natural order, not only the order between you and the gods, but the order between you and your society. And society will punish you for that. And if society doesn't, then nature will. And if nature doesn't, then the gods will. And so this is what the Greeks teach. And they're not dumb about it. I'm not saying that they're totally correct about it. But what they get right is that it is a tragedy, right? Charlotte's Web is a tragedy. It's just that they left the ending off of it for Wilbur. They gave you the ending of Charlotte, which is that she died. Kind of a noble death, but they don't show you the sad, pathetic death of Wilbur, somebody who believes he could be special his whole life. No. That's kind of a tragedy in my view. And kids can learn from this, right? But they're going to have to learn a little bit more than what the writer of that story is willing to tell them. So that's my deconstruction of Charlotte's Web. You happy now?
Destruction, that's for
Yes,
sure.
absolute destruction.
Destruction.
As my boy would call it, dinstruction.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Dunstroyed. You
It's
dunstroyed
right.
it.
Done destroyed. Love that kid.